Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. Thank you to everybody, over 40 people joining me last night on a hangout to brainstorm about new ideas, and new way forward, and formats and segments for this show. I love crowdsourcing this show. I love having you be a part of it. Everybody can be a producer. I like to think that's what makes it unique, as well as this amazing community that we have built together. I want to say thank you to several new subscribers this week. I'll read the names at the end of the week, but moving a lot of subscriptions this week. And just when I thought people might be canceling because I wasn't doing this traditional news segment, more people signing up. So that's a great sign, and it makes me really happy and making personally for a good week with my work. But, of course, for the news yesterday, which I'm about to, of course, talk about, but also want to tell you who's on the show. The great Sarah Kendzior sat down with me yesterday, the co-host of Gaslit Nation. She's written 3 books. She's got a new book out. I'll tell you more about her. But Sarah and I had a great conversation I think you're going to really like. And I also caught up with Eric Segall, who texted me and said, I'm in a mood. And when he texts me that, I just generally call him and press record. So it's all about Justice Thomas and his wife, Justice Clarence Thomas, and his wife, Ginny, pretty much. I think you're going to really like that as well. But, of course, there is only one real news story on the top headlines across the world this morning as you wake up and press play on the podcast. And that, of course, is the massacre in Texas at an elementary school in Texas yesterday, where as of just before 11 p.m. East on Tuesday night, reports are 19 students and at least 2 adults are dead after a gunman opened fire at a Texas elementary school, according to Texas Department of Public Safety on CNN. The governor there, who is part of the problem, said the suspect entered Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, with a handgun. Said the shooter, an 18-year-old man who was a local there, was dead. The elementary school is located about 85 miles west of San Antonio. The shooter apparently crashed his car near the school with a rifle and backpack while wearing body armor, was engaged with law enforcement, but still entered the school, where he entered several classrooms and started shooting. President briefed on the shooting in Texas, addressed the nation. But here is the opening of the 3 network nightly news broadcasts from a day that will forever live in American infamy. May 24th, 2022. NBC News, Lester Holt.
Breaking news tonight, the horrific shooting rampage at an elementary school in Texas. The unspeakable loss, at least 14 children and 1 teacher killed in the mass shooting at that elementary school 80 miles outside San Antonio. Roughly a dozen others injured. The images coming in, the massive police presence, the gunman identified as an 18-year-old believed to have been killed by officers. Parents rushing to be reunified with their terrified children. Our team at the scene tonight.
David Muir, ABC News.
Tonight, the breaking news as we come on the air, the horrific scene unfolding in Texas. The deadly mass shooting at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. 14 children and a teacher killed. The awful images coming in from Robb Elementary School, about 80 miles from San Antonio. Late today, Governor Abbott confirming the staggering toll there. The alleged gunman also dead. The governor identifying the suspect as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, a student at Uvalde High School. Authorities also believe he shot and killed his grandmother beforehand. Tonight, what we have just learned about the suspect and the heartbreaking scene now unfolding. The parents gathering late today, waiting for official word on their children.
John Dickerson in for Nora O'Donnell on CBS News, and a good night to take off.
Breaking news, tragedy in Texas. An elementary school shooting leaves at least 14 students and a teacher dead. Even more injured. Tonight, the latest details. A gunman opens fire on second, third, and fourth graders. The horrifying latest about what happened inside a school in Uvalde, Texas. Plus, the investigation. The FBI, ATF on the scene, trying to piece it all together. Tonight, what we're learning about yet another mass shooting in America.
All right, and President Biden addressed the nation last night. I'll give you the first 2 minutes of his comments, which I thought, he's always good as the consoler-in-chief, the way his predecessor, not his predecessor, but Barack Obama, his old boss, was. Of course, Joe Biden lost his own child and wife in a horrible car accident when he was a young senator, and is really good in these moments. Here he is.
Good evening, fellow Americans. I'd hoped when I became president I would not have to do this again. Another massacre, Uvalde, Texas, an elementary school. Beautiful, innocent, second, third, fourth graders. And how many scores of little children who witness what happened see their friends die as if they're on a battlefield, for God's sake. They'll live with it the rest of their lives. There's a lot we don't know yet. There's a lot we do know. The parents who will never see their child again, never have them jump in bed and cuddle with them. Parents will never be the same. To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away. There's a hollowness in your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it and never going to be able to get out. Suffocating. It's never quite the same. It's the feeling shared by the siblings and the grandparents and the family members and the community that's left behind.
Okay, well, there was more to it, but that's what I wanted to give. That's the president last night. And here is Senator Chris Murphy, who has been probably the most outspoken member of the U.S. Senate when it comes to gun violence. He, of course, is senator from the state which had before this, the worst, and I think still is, if the death count, if that's how we're measuring it, stays the same. Horrible massacre of young children in their school. Horrible that you have to classify so specifically. There's so many of these types of shootings in Connecticut, of course. Here is Chris Murphy on the Senate floor yesterday.
There are 14 kids dead in an elementary school in Texas right now. What are we doing? What are we doing? Just days after a shooter walked into a grocery store to gun down African-American patrons, we have another Sandy Hook on our hands. What are we doing? There have been more mass shootings than days in the year. Our kids are living in fear every single time they set foot in a classroom because they think they're going to be next. What are we doing? Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate? Why do you go through all the hassle of getting this job, of putting yourself in a position of authority, if your answer is that as this slaughter increases, as our kids run for their lives, we do nothing? What are we doing? Why are you here? If not to solve a problem as existential as this. This community in Texas will never, ever be the same. Why? Why are we here? If not to try to make sure that fewer schools and fewer communities go through what Sandy Hook has gone through, what Uvalde is going through. Our heart is breaking for these families. Every ounce of love and thoughts and prayers we can send, we are sending. But I'm here on this floor to beg, to literally get down on my hands and knees and beg my colleagues. Find a path forward here. Work with us to find a way to pass laws that make this less likely.
Chris Murphy yesterday in the U.S. Senate. Well done. And finally, here is Fred Gutenberg on MSNBC. His daughter was killed during the Parkland shooting in Florida in 2008. He was on MSNBC yesterday in the aftermath of Monday's deadly elementary school shooting with Nicole Wallace. And he's not holding back in this appearance, even drops the F-bomb on cable TV, laying into politicians unwilling to find a solution. And this is just about 2 minutes of it.
I am simply going to say this to the families there. You're going to go through pain. It's not right, and it shouldn't be. But I am here for you, and others will be here for you. You will be okay. You will find a path forward. But for the next bunch of days and weeks, you have to get through this horror, because people failed. I'm done. They fucking failed our kids again. Okay, I'm done. I've had it. You know, how many more times? Are we? And we're going to sit back. I'm going to listen to that governor of Texas talk about why he pushed to fight for laws in Texas that made it easier for the guns to be had by those who want to kill? How many more times? I'm sorry. I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. You know, but you know what? Tomorrow, I'm going to wake up. We're going to keep fighting, because as long as there's people like you and people like Senator Murphy, and, you know, I look on the House, they're trying to pass things. I look at a president who will sign legislation that makes it to his desk. This was predictable, but it was also preventable. Sadly, the next one that's going to happen is also predictable if we keep doing nothing. And so I am begging, Senator Cruz, I sat with you in your office 2 years or so ago. I listened to your nonsense. I listened to your BS. I listened to you explain to me why you thought we didn't need the bare minimum of effective background checks. March into Senator Murphy's office right now, tonight, and you be the Republican who says, I've had enough. Because if you don't get your ass out of office, you don't belong there.
All right, Fred Gutenberg, powerful statement on MSNBC yesterday, calling out one specific senator. Well, Steve Kerr, who is the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, who's been very outspoken on this issue, particularly probably because he himself lost his own father, Malcolm Kerr, in 1984 to two gunmen. And he was furious and emotional and fed up. And this is powerful. 2 minutes hat tip to listener Tina Winsett, who always sending great content to me, and glad I could get this on for you. Here it is.
In Southern California, and now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, you know. Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check? 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
And he just walks out of the press conference, the pregame press conference. Steve Kerr, very powerful. All right, I just want to read a few tweets that I saw in the aftermath, share with you some more perspective. Mark Joseph Stern writes about the Supreme Court at Slate, and I think this is, unfortunately, the most important point. The Supreme Court's conservative supermajority is about to dramatically expand the scope of the Second Amendment and prohibit us from protecting our communities by enacting gun safety laws through the democratic process. So, as I said at our hangout last night, this is my concern, that even if we organize and vote out the terrible Republicans who want more guns on the street and in the hands of any person who is virulently racist, terribly mentally ill, or could injure themselves. Well, even if we did that, even if Democrats took control of state legislatures, would the Supreme Court uphold those laws that we passed? Dave Rothkopf tweets, the only thing politicians should be praying for following yet another mass shooting is forgiveness and the wisdom and strength to change their ways. Wajad Ali writes on Twitter, another mass shooting in Texas, 14 students dead, and nothing will change because this country hates its children, but it sure does love guns. Imagine this happening anywhere else. How would adults respond? I'm so sad and furious, and I'll read a little bit from his piece that he put out at the Daily Beast last night. Ted Cruz is talking about hopes and prayers, and everybody is going after him. Brian Rosenwald, who joins me all the time, he writes, another young male, like it's one population responsible for almost all of our gun violence. Maybe, just maybe, we could try to keep guns away from them. George Hahn on Twitter. Hey, I'm glad we're pouring time, money, energy, and resources into banning books and making sure kids don't hear about slavery and gay people. Of course, a question of priorities. J.L. Covan tweeted, imagine being more aggressive about wearing a mask in a cheesecake factory than you are about limiting guns. The Senate, both structurally and morally, is the midwife of this country's destruction. But too many of our citizenry have rendered America irrevocably damaged. All right, well, there are just a few tweets and perspectives I want to mention. I mentioned Waj's piece at the Daily Beast titled, The Texas School Shooting is More Proof That the U.S. Hates Its Own Children. We do nothing about gun violence in schools. We let the child tax credit expire, and we demand women have babies with no help at all. What else can you conclude upon learning of yet another tragic, senseless mass school shooting, this time in Uvalde, Texas, where an 18-year-old man walked into an elementary school and killed, at a minimum, 19 students and 2 adults. In other countries such as Australia and New Zealand, a tragic mass shooting prompts outrage, shock, and action. The adults in charge say, never again, and immediately enact gun reform. In America, even though many studies consistently show that an increase in available guns leads to more shootings and suicide, we simply say, again and again, please. Gun sales in America have also skyrocketed this past year. We have more guns than people in America, a country of 333 million. The Texas shooting, which reportedly killed children from 2nd to 4th grade, was the 27th school shooting of 2002, and it's still only May. In other countries, kids are preparing for the summer break. In America, our kids are worried about surviving the rest of the school year. When I was growing up, we had fire drills. Now our kids have shooting drills. But Republicans in particular love telling ourselves in the world that we're pro-life. The violence and utter disregard for our children's health is so overwhelming, so you shouldn't be blamed for forgetting that just yesterday, 4 teenagers were shot and killed in South Carolina. He goes on to write in this piece, in America, we'll use our fingers to point and shoot our guns, but we won't lift a finger to protect children once they're out of the womb. With such callous disregard, how could a reasonable person come to any other determination? Not only do we not, quote, think of the children, we don't collectively care much if they even make it out of 4th grade alive. Provocative, passionate, and on point, I think, as always. Wajad Ali, read it at the Daily Beast. All right. Well, I do just want to just quickly mention there were primaries last night. So in case you don't know, I'm just going to give you a rundown of some of the major winners. I know, a hard pivot to make, but Sarah Sanders apparently is going to be the Republican nominee for gubernatorial race. She's the projected winner, landslide of the Republican nomination. She'll likely face Democrat Chris Jones in the general election. Of course, the daughter of the former governor. I always feel bad for states like that, including my own, where you're just not creative enough to support someone with a different last name, Mario Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, Mike Huckabee, Sarah Sanders. I mean, just terrible. And apparently Herschel Walker has won the Georgia Republican Senate primary. He will go on to face Raphael Warnock in November. And what an unbelievable mismatch that is. And of course, the other high profile election is that Brian Kemp projected to defeat Trump-backed David Perdue in Georgia as well. So those are the three stories I'm paying attention to, national stories. But what about in your town or in your state? I would love to hear from you about results there. What did I miss? standupwithpete@gmail.com. Okay, well, that's all I've got for you here at the top. I know last night it was great to hang out with people because in the wake of this horrible disaster, you feel so alone, so scared, so frustrated, so sad, so angry. And so we hung out last night. It's just important to be a part of a conversation or a group. And so I would love to have you there, and I'll try to host hangouts in times of tragedy and triumph when we can get together and be together and communicate. It was great. And if I can have the time, I'll try to edit some of that because people make great points about gun violence in the country. And then, of course, like I said, we talked about the future format of the show, which I'm going to keep playing around with this first segment. I really appreciate you bearing with me. You guys are amazing. And that is what keeps me going every day, having this family beyond my own family that I love getting to know. So reach out, and thank you to all new subscribers and listeners. Welcome to it. I have an awesome two guests joining me today. Of course, Eric Segall coming up, constitutional law scholar. But first, the great Sarah Kendzior joins me. Sarah, a longtime regular here on this show. She has been so right about so many things over the years. She's the author of The View From Flyover Country, Hiding in Plain Sight, and her new book is available in September. You can pre-order it now. It's titled They Knew: How a Culture of Conspiracy Keeps America Complacent. She is the co-host of Gaslit Nation. She's got her Ph.D. She is a great journalist, a great writer, and you can follow her on Twitter at Sarah Kendzior, sarahkendzior.com. I love this conversation. She is so good, as always. And here we go. Sarah Kendzior joining us now, and I had tweeted yesterday, Sarah, that you were going to join me, and someone who I admire and respect texted me, "Hey, that's a good get." And my response had to be, dude, not my first rodeo. I mean, Sarah and I go back, I've interviewed her 1,000 times. I couldn't act like it was the first time. So thank you for making me look good.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's true. I remember doing an interview with you in person in 2018 back in New York City when my first book came out. So, yeah, it's been a while of rehashing the same horrific events and people over and over again.
Well, they've developed. We're certainly not always rehashing. I think you're.
No, it's true.
It's just maybe it's some of the things we're seeing, the trends, the behaviors, the crimes, which are seemingly rehashing, and you always are good to explain that. But I'll just say this. I'm proud that I had you on at SiriusXM. I'm proud that we gave you that platform then because, and let's start there, you have been right way too often, as I also tweeted yesterday. And that means your credibility as a commentator, as an analyst of things, should go way up. And I'm not sure where your credibility has gone way up or not. I think it has, obviously, with your own independent media site. You guys are doing a great work at Gaslit Nation and, of course, your book sales. But when it comes to corporate media, what do they think now of Sarah Kendzior that you've been so right for so long?
I mean, I don't know, and I don't really care. That's not who I'm writing for. I think there's a tendency among pundits, but really among political officials, to want to either ignore or downplay what I'm saying because I destroy the plausibility of shock. If I spell out clearly a threat, if I spell out clearly the context of a threat and something that's been developing for years or decades, and therefore give them the opportunity, to stop these travesties or to elucidate them to the public, and they instead feign shock in order to avoid accountability, then that's enormously inconvenient for them because, that's their fallback position. It's like, oh my God, can you believe, what so-and-so said or did? We had no idea. Who could have seen this coming? And I'm like, No, I did, but not just me. It's like me and, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people seeing the same things that I'm seeing, because it's not that hard to see. Like with something like the January 6th attack, they plan it on the internet and then it's on television. Like these are not difficult crimes to solve. The difficulty is in saying, well, why aren't they solving them? Why are they feigning ignorance? Why aren't they holding people who are a grave threat to our democracy accountable? And that's when I get, very annoying for these people, because I'm like, well, here's how this complicated system of, corporate corruption, transnational organized crime, political corruption, media, corruption and subservience has developed. And obviously people aren't going to like that. And I don't expect those people to like that, but my audience likes it. So thank you.
Well, I certainly love it. And you're right to point out January 6th, but there's so many other things, so many other things that have happened in our country and in the world where maybe mainstream media or politicians say, well, we no one ever thought that this was going to happen or that could happen. And it's just not true. For example, something as like little as if we cut taxes for the wealthy, it's going to bankrupt the state of Kansas. Everybody said that was going to happen. If we deregulate the financial industry to blow up the world economy, lots of people said that was going to happen. If we invade Iraq, it's going to destroy the country. Dick Cheney said that was going to happen on 60 Minutes in like 94 after the first Gulf War, which is why they didn't go all the way. You, Sarah, have been saying all these things are going to happen. And unfortunately, like a sorceress, they do. And why don't those people get more credibility is the question. And
credibility from whom, though? I feel like there's this sort of
a critical mass
jerk effect where people like the Chuck Todd industrial complex gives credibility, to each other. They give credibility in this little insular world, and the broader world doesn't care. Like the broader world doesn't define credibility based on some antiquated notion of, institutional prestige or inherited wealth or where you live. I think that's increasingly true because, media has become increasingly decentralized. People are losing trust in institutions for the reason that institutions are not trustworthy. And that's a very unfortunate thing, that we can't trust our institutions, but it does lead people, I think, to, maybe sometimes practice more critical thinking, or certainly kind of expand the range of people who they'd like to hear analyze these events. They know what they're going to get on Fox. They know what they're going to get on MSNBC. We're going through the motions at this point because it is, the same players over and over again, the same politicians, the same types of crises, the same excuses over and over and over again. And I think folks are sick of it and they just want to kind of get to the bottom of why is this happening? Like, why am I, ordinary citizen, able to solve the crimes of the Mueller probe, of January 6th, of, economic decline? Why am I able to, as you mentioned, to foresee the disaster that was the war in Iraq or trickle down economics or whatever it is? And these assholes just sit there feigning, shock, and ignorance and oh my goodness, had I only known. It's like they knew. I mean, that's why my next book is called They Knew, because they knew. They're just pretending not to know.
I'm going to ask you about your next book, but let's continue. Just one more question about media. By the way, when you said, this is what I love about talking with you, you will never, ever, ever tell me on my show, where I'm the host of, where in the old days, if it was in person, I might have even gotten you coffee or had someone do it. You will never tell me what I want to hear. You'll never try to be, quote, polite to get invited back. That's a very rare quality for anybody. And I just love that.
I think that was a bit of a backhanded compliment there, but okay, I'll take it.
Well, why is it a backhanded compliment? It's a very rare quality. People don't do that.
Sarah, you're such an honest sort of asshole.
You are an honest sort of asshole, and
that's fine with me. It's true.
You're an honest sort of asshole, which is what what media, what a conversation like the one we're having needs. It doesn't need more people waxing each other. It doesn't need that. It needs you, and that's why I like being in conversation. It's different talking to you like this than it is listening to your podcast or obviously reading your writing, because if I say a thing and you're like, yeah, I don't like that framing, I just like that. Sorry to take a moment there to point that out, but it's less about Sarah and more for people listening. That's what you should want. that attitude. And there's a lot of people like that, but not nearly enough. So getting back to media, though, I told you I dumped the news segment here. I was giving like a 30-minute, robust, comprehensive, hour to hour, most important issues with audio, as much context as I could provide. And I realized, you know what? It's unhealthy for me, and it's unhealthy, and it's unhealthy for people listening. It's keeping them addicted. I've been critical of this, and yet I was selling it. What do you think about the issues that we have moving through life, potentially becoming addicted and controlled by the constant drip of social media, 24-hour cable media news?
Yeah, I think it's a real problem because I think people are traumatized by the events of the last 5 years, foremost by the pandemic. And, that's the kind of topic that you can't really look away from because you have to know what's developing with it for your own safety, in order to make decisions about, where you're going to go and what you're going to do and so forth. Then you also have, political violence, rapid political decline, institutional decline, which had followed, a very long period of stagnation and kind of a downhill spiral that's been going on since my birth. I mean, people, especially I think for you and me, we're parents and we really have to pay attention to a lot of these things, not for ourselves, not for our self-interest, but to keep our kids safe. And if we have elderly parents ourselves, like to try to keep our parents safe, we're that sandwich generation with a lot of responsibilities. And I think when, and this isn't just true for us, I think it's true for anyone that if you're watching the news obsessively, when you're constantly trying to stay on top of all these crises, it is unhealthy for you. Like it is, as you said, addictive. It's hypervigilance, and it's completely understandable. Like I don't want people to beat themselves up for doing it. You and I have to do it to some extent because it's our jobs. We're journalists, we cover political affairs, and we're in this horrible dark time. And that's just where our lives are. I'd much rather the news be good. I'd rather genuinely good, positive developments happen, and then I'd go report on those. I'd much rather my life be that way because that would mean my future is good. My children's future is good. For regular folks, and here's the part where I destroy both our audiences now. But I would encourage people to definitely take breaks from it, not feel bad about taking breaks, from the news, take days off. If you have a particular issue you're deeply invested in, work on that, work with people in your community, that sort of thing. But don't feel like you have to bear all the pain of the world on your shoulders alone. I think a lot of people feel that way now because our institutions and officials have failed us so much. They think, oh my God, I've got to solve it now. What should I do? It's like, well, there are people that should be doing this, and no one can fix these things alone. Like no one can. So cut yourself some slack for just getting through the last few years.
Yeah, no, I think I think that's such great advice about giving yourselves breaks, and I think my wager, my gamble was, will more people be kind of addicted or need this news segment than those who reach out to me and say, Pete, I love the interviews, but the news is too depressing. I can't listen to that first thing in the morning. Because it was, as much as I try to make fun of it and have fun with it. But, you also make a great point about you do need to, as a parent, as a responsible person, not to be apathetic. You need to be able to, and using the pandemic as an example, but I would just argue, well, yeah, so you listen to an interview on PBS, or you read a long form in The Atlantic, or you listen to one of the many of the experts that I had, long form, and that's being responsible, right? You don't need to be checking Twitter and watching freaking Don Lemon or whatever it is, having cable news going on all day long to know everything you need to know about the pandemic or any other important issue. Read Sarah's book if you want to know what's happening in the country, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I also, I think during the period where Trump was the president, people had this sort of day-to-day drama, this sort of heightened, like, what the hell is he going to do to us now? And that's still there. That's still there lurking in the background. But I think if you want like a broader understanding of, how did he get there to begin with? And why are we in this situation? Like broaden your horizons, read fiction, read history, go to an art museum, like go to a rock concert, like just do something to kind of open your mind back up away from that like Trump magnet or whatever it is that's, sucked you into that vortex. Because it's just an unhealthy way to live life, in part because it narrows your critical thinking. It keeps you very locked in the present when I think you need to see the full scope of the situation.
Oh my gosh. I was going to leave it there, but that last thought needs to be unpacked, please. How does it narrow your thinking and how do we change that so that we can, as you said, understand the wider story that is unhappening, which is what your podcast and your book certainly do, and a lot of others. But what is that? How does it?
Yeah, well, I think, there's been reporting that's been decontextualized. There's a tendency in media to report on something abhorrent that Trump or someone in his circle did, or that a Democrat in their circles did, and disconnect it from all the preceding events, from preceding administrations, from broader social, economic, political issues, whereas they're really intertwined. People aren't vetted anymore. It's very funny to me when people are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you." They'll say predicted this or something about Merrick Garland, and all I've really done is dig into his past and into his inner circle and just bring out information that is in the public domain that has already been reported and say, this is what actually happened. Like, you've been fed propaganda and lies about his career. This is what his actual career looks like. And then you can try to, hypothesize, well, what will he do in the future based on this past trajectory? Like, I've never made firm predictions in that sense. Like, I'm not a psychic friend. I'm not psychic, and I'm also not your friend, but people are so, they're so astounded. As you pointed out earlier, I'm an honest asshole, but
you said that, you said it, and I did confirm it.
That is true. But people are so astounded just by this process, which is basically what any historian or anthropologist, which is what I was trained in, would do, which is, of course, you dig into the past. Of course, you look for patterns. Of course, you try to situate things in their historic context. And that's what I did in Hiding in Plain Sight. It's what I've done in They Knew. But I think people get addicted to these little piecemeal episodes, and they're not seeing how, in Trump's case, because you're talking about transnational organized crime, of course, these people truly are all connected. And I think there's a hesitance to speak about it in that way because people are so afraid of sounding like a quote unquote conspiracy theorist. But the thing is, when there are actual conspiracies, by which I mean secret plots by a powerful group of actors to, hurt the public good, then, and there's not transparency about them, there's not hearings, there's no real investigations, etc. Of course, you're left theorizing. That is what people do, whether they are in, QAnon, or they're Trump supporters, or they're Democrats, or they're leftists. Everyone is left with theories. And that kind of line of critical inquiry, especially when people really do discover through archived public domain information, these incredibly unsavory and disturbing connections, powerful actors don't want folks ruminating on that. So they'll label you a conspiracy theorist or paranoid or an alarmist or what have you in order to negate that spirit of inquiry.
So well said. And you have done such a great job at being able to, I don't know, what are you like on the spectrum somewhere in terms of being able to remember? Like, what's with you have the ability to remember, and can this person was here and had this relationship with this person, and have been able to like put that out long form. I feel like everybody always says, "Oh, I have ADD," or "I can't remember anything," but you seem to be able to, keep in perspective in the historical timelines of who knew where, when, had this relationship, made this deal. It's not important what that quality is about you. You're just a great journalist. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's, sort of darkly funny that we live in an era where if you're good at your job, if you're good at journalism, you're seen as possibly having some sort of disability because it's so rare that people are doing the most basic things that used to be what journalism was about. So it's like, oh my God, you're asking who, what, where, when, and why, and then you're doing research. And then you're actually able to remember the names and the dates and put them together. Like, this used to be the standard job.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And now they're not doing it. Now it's like, do you have a mental disorder?
Yeah, well, to be clear, to be clear, you're absolutely right. But to be clear, when I said on the spectrum, I mean like some people that are on some kind of a spectrum. I don't mean even like autism or anything. I mean, that have that ability, that brilliant. It's not a disability, or maybe it is. Maybe it's torture because they can recall things from whatever.
I'm just going to say it's torture because I would really rather not know a great deal of what I've learned. It hasn't been fun finding these things out.
Right.
Ignorance can be bliss to a certain extent, and I'd rather my mind was filled with other things. But there are times where I feel sort of obligated to cover certain topics because I really feel like I'm alone on them, even though they're big stories that, in a strange way, there are things I cover that I feel like, wow, a lot of folks on the right as well as the left should be concerned by this development. Yet there's just nothing in any of the news outlets. And that makes me suspicious, because that makes me feel like there are, interrelated actors. Like, this isn't a bipartisan fight. It's a bipartisan collaboration to protect extremely powerful and corrupt interests. And, like the role of Jamie Gorelick, for example, in a number of committees and advisory capacities for, both Trump people and Biden people is an example of this. And there's been nothing. Like, it's just Gaslit Nation. It's just me and Andrea kind of breaking that one down.
I just saw you talking about that on social media, and I'm trying to look up Jamie Gorelick to find out who that is.
Oh, God. I mean, she's like the Forrest Gump of corruption.
Oh, my God. Hold on a second.
She's like the Roy Cohn of our era. I'm serious. She's so bad. She started out, this is basically short. I can't fit it all. Like, it'll be like a multi-hour show if I tell you everything she did. You can go on Gaslit Nation, listen to it. Anyway, so she was the Deputy Attorney General of the Clinton administration, and she was Merrick Garland's boss and mentor in that administration. And before that, she was mentored by Alan Dershowitz. That's the person who was most influential on her. Then it's like, if you go and look at any major scandal, or not any, but many major scandals of the last 30 years, she's involved. She's the person who created the barrier between the FBI and the CIA that prevented them from sharing intelligence related to 9/11. She then refused to talk about that on the 9/11 Commission. She was involved in the Fannie Mae loan scandal. She, I think, managed to swindle $26 million for herself. She represented BP after their oil spill. She volunteered to represent, a bunch of police who had killed innocent Black men. I mean, this is the thing. She's putting herself out there very much like Dershowitz as, I'm going to represent you. But here's the clincher. She was Jared and Ivanka's lawyer. Like, if you're wondering why Jared and Ivanka got into the White House, it's because of Jamie Gorelick volunteering to be their, quote, ethics lawyer. Jared and Ivanka's ethics lawyer is Merrick Garland's closest friend and mentor. She also got Rex Tillerson into the White House. None of them should have gone in because of their Kremlin ties and ties to oligarchs and the Saudis and, Israelis and, all of these things that would normally prevent people from getting a security clearance. She overrode that, and she volunteered to do so. So now she's not only overseeing DOJ, through advising Merrick Garland. The January 6th committee has hired her to write the narrative of, or guide the narrative of January 6th. So that's obviously a conflict of interest. Like, if they're interviewing Jared and Ivanka, how in the world could Jared and Ivanka's lawyer be the person guiding them while also guiding the DOJ? And then to just add on to that, now she and Michael Chertoff, who's another absolutely nightmarish figure. He was in the Bush administration. He co-authored the Patriot Act. He promoted the use of torture. He represented a key oligarch mobster, Dmitro Firtash, and, who also, if you go and look into my work on Gorelick, is associated with her. Anyway, major conflict of interest. Those two are overseeing, for now, the Disinformation Governance Board, the one that caused such a controversy when it was, Nina Jankowicz who was supposed to run it. But this is so much worse. These are veterans of corruption. One Democrat, Jamie Gorelick is a Democrat, one Republican. It is genuinely dangerous. I don't want them in any kind of authoritative position, but I don't know really what this board is going to do, but I don't want them to arrange it. These are people who are, very well known for covering up information about 9/11 and for pathologically lying about things like the Iraq War or corporate corruption or Ivanka and Jared and Trump and all of this. Like, these are cover-up artists, and they're now being selected by Biden to run this Disinformation Governance Board. And to my knowledge, no one has asked the Biden administration why, why these two. So anyway, my guess is, sorry, go on.
Well,
I was just going to say, I think people are afraid of them. I think they're afraid of her. And I don't know, I'm not necessarily saying in a like, she's going to kneecap you or kill you kind of way. I think they're afraid for their careers because she's so incredibly well connected. Because when you're involved in that many horrific scandals, it's because people know that you're the person to call. You're the cover up artist. And I think they're afraid of, maybe for their careers, what will she do? Or what will Dershowitz do? Or other people connected to her? What will they do to me? And so they stay very quiet. But it's worth looking at because I think it helps explain why there's been inaction from Merrick Garland's DOJ on basically every issue.
Well, I mean, we can't know that, I guess, right? We can't know if she's... For sure what?
That she's like the cause. I think it's at the least her philosophy of law, crime, and government is influential on him. I mean, he said that, she said that as well. So he's taken his cues. At the least you can say that. But yeah, it's an enigma. It's the kind of thing that needs more rigorous reporting. All I've done is just, dredge up the background on her and, make it available more broadly to the public. But somebody should be looking into like, why is she on all these committees? Why is she guiding the official narrative of January 6th? And also, why has that narrative already been written with an introduction by David Remnick? It's for sale on Amazon. It actually comes out the same day as my book. And before the hearings are held, I'm kind of wondering about that. Like, I don't know if people know this, that the January 6th committee report is done before the public hearings, before they do anything. Like, it's a pre-written narrative. Like,
I didn't know that.
It really hasn't been. And also what's weird is it's I'm gonna get in trouble for this. It's being published in conjunction with, I think, my own publisher, with Macmillan. I want to know who gets the money from the sales of the January 6th Commission report, because the thing is this has happened in the past, like after Watergate, the Star.
Yeah, no, I have all of those books on my shelf. The Tower Commission, 9/11 Commission.
Yeah, what usually happens is because it's, public domain evidence, it gets published like on the internet,
the Mueller
in our
report
modern era first, and it's free. And then a publisher will snatch up that information and like hire some sort of famous person to write a little intro, like Dershowitz is actually someone who did that with the Mueller report. And then they sell it. It's after the report comes out that they sell it, in part because you're not supposed to know when a committee has finished their work. Like, they're supposed to work until they find all the evidence. In this case, it seems like they've tried to preemptively wrap this up and then partner with a publisher to put it out and then sell it. And I'm like, well, who's getting the money? Like, well, it's probably the royalties, of this book. Like, victims of it's weird to me. I only found out about it because I was looking at the date for my own book and like what other books are coming on that date. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the January 6th committee book. Like, this is so crazy. I had no idea this even existed. And then there was like one or two articles about it. I think one was maybe in The Hill. I don't know, about the announcement of it as a book. And I don't know if there'll also be a free report. I mean, I assume there will.
There's got to be.
There'll be outcry if there isn't, but it's very strange, right?
Well, I'm going to start digging into this. It's spelled Gorelick, by the way. You're hearing Sarah talk about Jamie Gorelick.
Gorelick is how I've heard it pronounced.
Okay, Gorelick is how it's spelled.
I mean, if my name is spelled Gorelick, I totally would pronounce it Gorelick too. But you gotta do what you gotta do. It's like Alexander Coburn. You know what I'm saying?
I want to find that episode of Gaslit Nation, and I might even just clip out everything you just said there, just running through all the people and places that she's been involved with. That is absolutely nuts. And
so it gets worse. When you get into the big tech stuff, it gets even scarier. Anyway, you'll find it all. It's super, super
Well, it sounds like it sounds like people like that in the world of any industry, whether it be, I don't know, bio, medicine to fossil fuels, like there are hacks in the world. In every industry, there are hacks.
Ubiquitous.
They get really things done.
When it's like one person in all of these places, in all these committees, like why? Yeah. Why is this one individual constantly showing up in the worst of all circumstances? It's really strange. So,
all right. Well, we're going to dig into that, and you should listen to Gaslit Nation to I'm sure you already have. And I haven't been listening, but I need to be because it's such important information. Your new book, I want to ask you about. They Knew How a Culture of Conspiracy Keeps America Complacent. You've mentioned it. It is on sale September 13th, but it is available for pre-order right now, and you should go buy it, pre-order it right now. This is your third book, and people probably, hopefully already have The View from Flyover Country hiding in plain sight. Both of them are prominently displayed on my bookcase, and I tell people that I know you. So what about this one? They Knew. What's it about?
I think I gave the thesis away earlier. Basically it makes the argument that in an era where there are actual conspiracy theories, actual conspiracies, the idea of a conspiracy theory should not necessarily be a bad thing. It can be. It can be simply, propaganda being advertised as a conspiracy theory. Like that's what Alex Jones does. He puts out hate speech and lies and slander and kind of wraps it in this mantle of conspiracy theory. That's also something that Trump has done. But, I kind of want to just crack this open because what I've noticed is this parallel world where on one side you have like QAnon, just bleeding out, trust the plan, don't obey authority, but definitely obey all these particular authority figures, which would be like Trump, Michael Flynn, Lin Wood, et cetera. This real kind of subservient attitude wrapped up within that anti-government stance. And it's the exact same rhetoric and in many ways, some of the same logic as all the people that are like, trust Mueller, trust Garland, trust the system. Like it's this blind trust in institutions that are failing everybody. They're failing us across the board. And what that means is that really critical inquiries get abandoned. People become involved in cult-like thinking. They become complacent. And so, They Knew is I got to say, like, it's a weird book. I think it's the best book of the three. I think it's the most well-written. But it covers a lot of ground. I'll put it that way. It's not like hiding in plain sight, where it's like, here's the last 40 years and explaining, Trump's rise to power within this broader historic context of America's decline. I'm trying to just, I hope just folks look at it with an open mind, and I hope their minds become more open after reading it, not open in a sort of gullible, naive way, but kind of just like a willingness to think critically, to not feel like you have to conform and fit in a particular group or constantly prove your fealty to a party or an ideology or whatever, because we're in this situation where all of those, institutions and precepts are constantly manipulated through propaganda. And I think out of fear, people have lost their willingness to like do critical thinking out loud. That's also part of it, is there's so much mob harassment. There's, algorithms that are designed to enhance it. Everything is sort of pushing away citizens from the ability to think, with clarity and with compassion. And so I hope that, maybe this will contribute in some way. It's definitely a weird book. It's an interesting book.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get it and read it and talk more about it. Let me get a couple more minutes with you. And what else have you been alone on? Is there anything that comes to mind? You mentioned the whole thing about this woman, Jamie Gorelick, but is there anything else, whether it be about January 6th, the insurrection, or anything else that recently you've been talking about that you feel like is not getting enough attention?
Yeah, there's one thing that I think is strange, honestly, that the right wing doesn't jump all over. They claim to hate Nancy Pelosi and hate the Democrats. And a lot of times they'll spread lies about Pelosi or the Democrats. They'll say she's a drunk or something like that. There's an actual record of campaign contributions from the partners of sanctioned Russian oligarchs going to the DCCC and to Pelosi in particular since 2019 on. And around the time that they received these donations, which are the largest that the DCCC has ever received in its history, they began to drop their demands for accountability for Trump. And the main person who gave this money is a guy named Len Blavatnik. He was partnered with Oleg Deripaska and other sanctioned oligarchs. He's an American citizen, so this isn't an illegal donation. He immigrated from the former USSR, but he's how they get around the fact that people like Deripaska and other oligarchs can't donate. So anyway, they've been taking so much money. Like the Democrats are absolutely rolling in Kremlin money, oligarch money. Prior to that, the Republicans were the primary recipient of this money, and they're still getting this money. Like the NRA gets this money. Individual people like Kevin McCarthy get this money. They're all implicated too. But I think it's really weird, sort of, that say, if you were like a right-wing person, if you're like Sean Hannity or something, or Tucker Carlson, and you want to like take down Pelosi, this would seem really incriminating. Like, wow, Pelosi's taking so much money and the Democrats are taking so much money from all of these people who are helping the Kremlin. Like, what a scandal. And of course, I think, the reason they don't talk about this is because their own guys are also taking this money because it's all part of one system. You have, the attackers, you have the Republicans who are trying to destroy our country, destroy our democracy, create a one-party autocratic state. And then you have enablers on the Democratic side. And I don't think that it's the entirety of the party at all. I really think this is a matter of the leadership being deeply corrupt. Schumer is another recipient of that money. So you have the leader of the House, the leader of the Senate, and the DCCC. Like it adds up to a really bad picture. The only person I know who's really written about it in detail is Casey Michel, who wrote the book American Kleptocracy, and he's reported on a number of things having to do with shady ties between foreign plutocrats and oligarchs and politicians and corporations in the United States. But other than that, it's just kind of a blank. And those are all the sort of threads you should be pulling on. They'll lead you to people like Jared Kushner. They'll lead you to his whole network. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like completely alone I certainly don't feel alone in my interest in these stories, but among people who study this stuff, like, I think it's weird that it's a rarity just because I see an opportunity for the enemies of these people to weaponize this information. Yeah. And I don't think, I'm not encouraging that, but that's the way the world works. So I notice when they don't, I'm like, that's weird. Because like the last time I saw something this big get ignored, it was like the Jeffrey Epstein case back in 2016. Where I was like, this is really weird. Why is no one talking about this? Seems like a big deal to me. And people are like, shut up, Sarah, or I'm going to kill you, Sarah, or that doesn't matter, Sarah. It was one of the three. And we all know how the Epstein situation ended up. So I think I'm onto something. And anyway, it's worth looking into. It's all on the FEC website. You can go and look at these donations yourself.
Finally, what should we expect in terms of the January 6th public hearings? Do you think anything is going to come of that? I mean, we're running out of time, right? There's this idea that you're not supposed to have these types of hearings so close to an election, so we're running up. That's just
it's nonsense.
Right.
I mean, they blew it in February 2021 when they were doing the impeachment hearings, and those were actually good hearings. The people who ran them were doing a good job, and they were going to bring in witnesses, and then they didn't, and they abruptly ended them. And they said the reason we're ending them is because we're going to be nonstop, looking into January 6th, rounding up the operatives who planned it and plotted it. And then it took them, 6 months to even form the committee. Then they've had one hearing since then. It's been nearly a year since their last hearing. And now they're going to do 6 hearings and put 2 in primetime. This is actually something else that I discuss in They Knew, is how hearings actually can bring about accountability, because they change the expectations of the public. The public stops thinking that elite criminal impunity is inevitable. They start understanding the mechanisms of how these operations work, and they start demanding justice. They know that this is the real trickle-down economics, is, transnational organized crime, white-collar crime, trickling down and destroying, their localities. Like, we're seeing that constantly. And it's just something that I think they don't want to pursue it. I'm not quite sure, why they abandoned the pursuit of justice when we had the worst attack on the Capitol since 1812. This is a major event. My expectations were always tempered by, the prior failures of all these individuals. But I really thought, even I thought, that the January 6th committee would do a better job, that people like Jamie Raskin and so forth would be on the ball and really mean it when they said they were going to bring accountability. I don't know quite what's going on within the relationship between them and the DOJ. They're claiming the DOJ won't give them the information that they need. But then I look at Jamie Gorelick kind of overseeing both of these entities. And I'm like, this looks like you once again running out the clock, coming up with excuses, coming up with these lines about why things got derailed. I was like, this is a seminal moment for our country. This is a real do or die situation in the most literal sense. And you really all seem to just, be on the side of die, as in wither away,
right.
Like a kind of not with a bang, but a whisper situation. That should be the Democrats' motto. But,
all right, fine. Do you have time just to ask? I just want to ask you about Putin and where you think he's at. Or do you got to go?
No, you can
okay.
ask. Is that just a question where he's at?
Yeah, I mean, like,
mourning the loss of his yachts.
You and Andrea have done amazing work. Obviously, she's got so many connections and has written so much, and including a film about the history of Ukraine. You guys have done awesome work on that. It's interesting because you're not always on the same page vis-a-vis Putin and his behavior and his incentives. I love to hear those conversations. But where do you think he's at here? How many months in end of February to this invasion? Where is Putin? What has he got left?
I mean, he's losing. But what I worry about, and today Henry Kissinger was advising everyone to go along with this idea. So it's a bad idea because Henry Kissinger.
I saw him trending. What's that about?
Henry Kissinger is saying that Ukraine should give up some of its land to Russia for the sake of world peace. That's always been Henry Kissinger's argument. Like, I'm not sure people are aware of how deeply enmeshed Kissinger is with the Trump crime cabal. He's actually the person who helped set up the relationship between Jared Kushner and the Russians that were involved with the 2016 election. He's the person who was there when Trump was partying with Kislyak and Lavrov in the Oval Office on the day that he fired Comey. Kissinger has wanted this. Kissinger's on the side of Trump. So of course, Kissinger, who has been also a long-term friend of Putin, is saying, yeah, give Putin what he wants. Like, give him part of Ukraine, which is awful. I mean, the situation is abhorrent. It's an attempted genocide on Ukrainians by Putin, by the Kremlin. And they can't give anything, because the thing is, even if you give them something, if you think that's somehow going to end this, it's not. They invaded Ukraine in 2014. They took Crimea. They took part of eastern Ukraine, and they just kept going and going and going. And because nobody stopped them, they wouldn't even enact sanctions because Westerners were so greedy. They wanted that dirty money. He then invaded the entirety of the country. And, if you listen to Russian media, they're talking about invading Poland, invading Moldova. It seems like this has backfired tremendously for the Kremlin, because you now have Sweden and Finland wanting to join NATO, among other things. I'm most worried about it as a humanitarian catastrophe for Ukrainians. The death toll, the time it will take to rebuild if they're able to rebuild, and whether this threat will just continue expanding, because Putin isn't the type to back down. The most likely way that would happen is if his interior ministry, if this sort of, ex-KGB or current FSB types and GRU types that surround him decide he's more trouble than he's worth. Maybe they'll get rid of Putin, but they'll still be left with the structure of the Kremlin, which is an authoritarian surveillance state and a kleptocracy. So that's, I'm not seeing good things in the future for Russia in any way. I just hope Ukraine doesn't continue to incur humanitarian losses, because that's the most upsetting thing about this.
You think Finland and Sweden joining NATO is a good idea?
I can't blame them for wanting to do it. I mean, I think you have to look at this from the perspective of these countries who, especially Finland, have lived in constant fear of first the Soviet Union and Russia. And they live in that fear because Russia keeps threatening to invade them or has invaded them in the past. I mean, that's why the Baltic states, immediately wanted to join NATO. Like, it's not some sort of weird abstract notion. It's, you're a little country and there's a giant country right near you, and you need to have some backup in case it invades you. And until Russia invaded the totality of Ukraine, Ukraine, a lot of people thought that that was paranoia, despite the entire history of the Soviet Union as a colonial empire, and before that, Tsarist Russia as a colonial empire. But it's like, yes, of course they're going to invade you if they think you're weak, and you do need some backup and some support. Is it going to make tensions worse? Yes, but the reasons tensions are high is because the Kremlin keeps invading people. So maybe put, the onus on them.
Yes, both things can be true at once is a really important point. Do you agree, finally, with the following tweet? You mentioned Kissinger. I hadn't seen that, so I quickly Googled or went on Twitter. And this tweet from a guy named John Lee at Korean Foreigner, he writes, Henry Kissinger is proof that evil can never be destroyed. Long after the nuclear bombs detonate and the world's next apex predators turn out to be cockroaches, Kissinger will still be there, demanding the cockroaches take him seriously. Do you think that's accurate?
I mean, the guy is 99. There's that Twitter account that's like, is Henry Kissinger dead yet? And then the other day they tweeted no, and we didn't think we'd have to run this account for this long. It's interesting to me because he's one of these figures that basically 99% of the population, and I feel a little awkward saying this. There's going to be great jubilation on the day that he is no longer on this earth. And generally speaking, I don't cheer on the deaths of people, but this is an evil, evil person. This is a war criminal.
Particularly in Southeast Asia, I think, maybe.
Yes, he has murdered, or been responsible for the murder of millions of people, for, the destruction of the global order. It's incredible that he's not only still alive, but is still out giving horrific advice that will lead to more death and destruction. It does feel like he's this, sort of satanic otherworldly presence. I'm not saying that literally. I'm saying that's what it feels like. And so, it's going to be an interesting day on Twitter when that time comes. I hope, Elon Musk hasn't kicked all of us off by then, because it really may be a point of unity. In the way that we all mourned Betty White together, we were all genuinely sad about Betty White. You're going to get kind of a little flip side action there. So.
I think I'm going to play, when we're done here, and I'll send you a link, my friend Todd Zwillick, who is a pretty good journalist, very good journalist, confronting Kissinger on WNYC from a few years back. It's really, I think, probably the best. It's hard to do that with Kissinger because where he puts himself, but he stupidly agreed to sit down with Todd Zwillick, I guess, and Todd Zwillick really turned the screws on him, and I think I'll play it now if I remember. But check that out. Sarah, I'll let you go. Thank you for taking my call. I hope everybody goes to pre-order your new book. I hope they order your old books. I hope they subscribe if they haven't already, and support you on Patreon to Gaslit Nation. Give Andrea my best, and I hope to talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
All right, there you go. That is Sarah Kendzior, and I hope that you will let her know on Twitter that you heard her here on the show. I hope you'll listen to her podcast, Gaslit Nation, which she co-hosts with the great Andrea Chalupa, who's also joined me a couple of times, and I hope you'll get her new book, They Knew, right now. And speaking of right now, before I get to Eric Segall, I've got to tell you about Indeed.com, everybody. If you are looking to hire somebody for your firm, your company's next hire, and you want it to be someone who's really good at problem solving, thinks like an entrepreneur, shows up on time, and all the other things, you can find out everything about your next hire on Indeed.com. The thing you need help with, whatever it is, how to find them, easy. You need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. So instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, go to Indeed and check out their powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Find great talent faster through these time-saving tools that they offer, like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. And with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. A lot of listeners using Indeed, finding great talent for their companies, their firms, and Indeed saves you headaches. So you should be one of them. You don't want a headache, do you? You don't want these problems. You want to interview virtually with no downloads, plugins, or purchases. You can do it all in one place with Indeed. And after you use Indeed's virtual interviews, most employers say it saves them days of hiring time. With Indeed's reliability assessment, they can even predict candidates' punctuality and work attendance. Even better, Indeed is the only job site where you can only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed, unbelievably powerful hiring partner, delivering 4 times more hires than all the other job sites combined. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Sign up for Indeed now and get a $75 credit toward your first sponsored job. Plus, earn up to $500 extra in sponsored job credits with Indeed's virtual interviews. Visit Indeed.com/standup to learn more. Do it now. Even if you don't want to hire someone, go over there and check it out. You're going to love it. Indeed.com/standup. Claim your credits at Indeed.com/standup. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, we did it. Now time to get to Eric Segall. He is constitutional law scholar at Georgia State University, the author of 2 very important books, Supreme Myths and Originalism as Faith. And you should check out his podcast. Almost 65 episodes, is that what he said? Of Supreme Myths now. And I get all the credit for it, he says. Now, a little bit of credit. I mentioned that at the end. He's on Twitter and TikTok. You should check him out there. He's a monster now on TikTok, apparently. On Twitter, at @eSpenSegall. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Justice Clarence Thomas, because someone's in a mood. All right, well, when Eric Segall texts me and says, I'm in a mood, I just call him back and press record. So what's on your mind, Mr. Gone Viral on Twitter and TikTok with a really I think probably, terribly mean attack on Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas. You tweeted, Ginny Thomas was paid for many years to lobby against the Affordable Care Act, while Clarence Thomas on several occasions voted to overturn the Affordable Care Act or weaken it substantially. And Clarence Thomas failed to report her income from that lobbying for years. That's Clarence Thomas. Now, there's got to be a reason as to why that went viral. It's an important point that a lot of people probably don't know is out there, but it's gone like 50,000 people have liked. This is your biggest tweet ever. Huge tweet.
It's my biggest tweet ever and my 3rd biggest TikTok ever. 50,000. Well, I explain it. So there's nothing wrong with Ginny Thomas being paid to lobby against the Affordable Care Act. It's not great, but there's nothing wrong about that. You and I have talked before. We don't want the spouses of judges to be totally off limits for political activities, because in the end, that'll hurt women in this day and age anyway. So there's nothing wrong with Ginny Thomas lobbying against the Affordable Care Act, other than it shows her true personality as a really bad person. But nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with Justice Thomas voting to strike down the Affordable Care Act in its entirety on several occasions. Now, put those 2 things together, she's lobbying against it in the political arena, he's striking it down or voting to in the judicial arena. That's not great, but even that is not horrible, though it's not my first choice. Here's what's horrible. He didn't report her income from lobbying against the law that he voted to strike down. And so there's a federal rule that requires all judges to report their spouses' income. It's a good rule. It's a good rule. So that flaming liberal law professor, Jonathan Turley, remember him?
Yes.
I'm obviously being sarcastic
right
when I say flaming and liberal. He wrote a piece that says that the Ethics in Government Act, which, by the way, is an oxymoron, but leaving that aside, the Ethics in Government Act requires federal officials, including Supreme Court judges, to disclose their spouse's income. From 2003 to 2009, this is that liberal Jonathan Turley. From 2003 to 2009, Thomas checked the box for none on his wife's income, when in reality she was paid over $600,000 by the Heritage Foundation from 2003 to 2007. Eventually, Justice Thomas amended 13 years of returns and made this public statement, I quote Justice Thomas exactly. The income was, quote, inadvertently omitted due to a misunderstanding of the filing instructions. That's what Thomas said publicly. In related news to that, Thomas did report his wife's income correctly on disclosure forms from 1992 to 1996. So let's put all of that together, and we get the most important law since the New Deal being lobbied against by a Supreme Court justice's wife, while the law itself was being voted to be struck down by the justice himself, while he was hiding the money she was being paid for trying to get it struck down. None of that is good. It's all terrible. And the reason my tweet and TikTok went viral actually has nothing to do with any of that. The reason it went viral was because of another scandal involving Justice Thomas. By the way, I have like 10 of them I can share with you, where it turns out that Ginny Thomas was emailing the chief of staff of the Trump administration, Mark Meadows, after the election of 2020 and before January 20th, and other high-level Trump officials to do some stuff about the election, overturn it. Those emails were part of a lawsuit that the Supreme Court ruled 8-1, maybe 7-1, I forget, that Trump had to turn over. The one dissenter, Justice Thomas, whose wife's emails happened to be in that group, which meant he absolutely had to recuse himself. Because one thing Supreme Court judges cannot do is hear cases involving their spouses. That's just obviously absurd.
Well, that's unethical. Apparently, that's where the line is.
Yeah, and it's worse. Hold on, and I'm sorry. It's also worse than that, because it turns out she was also writing Arizona legislators prior to 2020, after the election, trying to encourage them that the election was stolen and they should appoint their own electors, while Justice Thomas, at the very same moment in time, was issuing judicial opinions about this independent state legislature doctrine, which says that, according to the United States Constitution, state legislatures, like the ones that Ginny Thomas was emailing, can basically overturn elections and do whatever they want.
Right.
So all of this is against the backdrop, Pete, of Justice Clarence Thomas speaking to the Heritage Foundation for 25 years consistently. Videos, appearances, guests of honor, speakers at dinner, without disclosing, starting to get riled up, that his wife was a paid consultant for Heritage during those years in the 2000s. In other words, an old friend of mine, John Malcolm, and we lost our friendship because of Trump, but an old friend of mine was interviewing Justice Thomas for Heritage, long interview, 2016, never disclosing that his wife was a paid employee for Heritage for years. And then one last thing about that, and this one's going to really rock your boat. Let's go back to 2000. I would like you to ask me what Ginny Thomas was doing in the year 2000. Please ask me that.
Hey, do you know what Ginny Thomas was doing around the year 2000?
I know one of the things. She was being paid by the Heritage Foundation. This is in the late fall of 2000, to help people get resumes together and get applications into the upcoming Bush administration for federal jobs.
Okay.
And she was doing that at exactly the same time that her husband was ruling in Bush versus Gore for Gore to become the next president.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes. Isn't that nice?
Wow.
And yes. Now, in between all of that, Justice Thomas spent 2 weekends in California at Koch brothers retreats. And one of those occasions admitted to stopping in briefly at kind of a political meeting that was going on, but as opposed to just giving a speech. But those retreats, Pete, were all about fundraising. They weren't Federalist Society debates. They weren't Federalist Society dinners in Washington. It was behind the scenes fucking fundraising. And you know who was there? Scalia and Thomas. Both of them were actually there twice.
Oh my God. So
I know.
So just though, give us a perspective on these kinds of ethical infractions, or maybe, or crimes, whatever you want to call them, right, when it comes to the history of the court, because the Supreme Court justices make really good money. They certainly can afford a nice home.
Hold on. They make decent money for public service. All of them could make a lot more money, obviously, working in the private sector.
Right, but I'm saying no one is going to suggest that they are. What's their salary?
I don't even know.
No one's going to make the suggestion that they can't afford to live near where they work, or, that they don't have a good, quote, good lifestyle. But at the same time, you look at what a Supreme Court justice or any judge's job is, and it's hard to find out where they might make a little extra on the side, because everything is an unethical situation. But therein lies the spouse, or, obviously a lot of them come to the court with money already and so on. But can you give any historical perspective on other spouses or other judges on the Supreme Court doing similar things?
Abe Fortas was supposed to replace Justice Warren as Chief Justice and took some gifts. It's a very convoluted affair, and no one really knows exactly what happened. That was in the late 60s. So they've always been political. And I think we've discussed in the past how in the 1950s, late 1940s, early 1950s, the justices, all of whom were appointed by Democrat presidents, either Roosevelt or Truman, would play poker games with Truman, like, in a social, like you and I would get together, go to a movie or play poker. The justices would play poker with the president. But we're not in that world anymore. We're in a different world now. And I think it's a question of degree, Pete. So I've always said that when people criticize Thomas and Alito and Gorsuch and Scalia and for speaking at Federalist Society events, I always say the same thing. But wait a minute, Ginsburg and Sotomayor and Kagan and others speak at American Constitutional Society events, the liberal, stepchild of Federalist Society. So I'm not sure any of them should do any of that, but that goes on both sides. What is different here, Pete, and it's really different, is that Justice Thomas's record of these kinds of activities is longer than any current justice that I know about. And it also, the other thing is, as I've written many, many times, his judicial ideology is simply not originalism, it's Republican Partyism. So his view of America is what the Republican Party is best. And I've delineated that in numerous articles, books, and blog posts. So his close connections to the Republican Party and his always ruling in favor of the Republican Party, and then his wife working for the Republican Party, and his wife talking to the chief of staff of the president of the United States trying to overthrow an election, and his wife being in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2020, though she left before Trump spoke. All of these things together are really, really bad. And then there's other things, too. So at his confirmation hearing, he said he had never discussed whether Roe versus Wade was correct ever in his life. Now, this is a guy who graduated law school around the same time as Roe and worked in the Reagan administration throughout the entire 1980s, when the Reagan administration asked the Supreme Court to overturn Roe 8 times. And he claims he never shed an opinion about it. Unfortunately, a biographer of Justice Thomas, a Republican, said, yes, I talked to Justice Thomas about Roe, and he thought it was wrong. And of course, he also voted to overturn Roe 1 year after he got on the bench. So he lied about that, leaving us, by the way, notice I'm not even mentioning Anita Hill. Like, I'm not even mentioning.
Oh, right. Anita Hill, the woman who accused him.
Because I can't prove it. So I'm not going to, I believe her, but I can't prove it. Everything I've said to you, which will be coming out in a blog post sometime next week, I can prove with cites, and I'm citing Jonathan Turley. I'm not citing liberals. I can prove everything I've said. I can't prove anything about Anita Hill, so I'm not even talking about that. Although I do want your audience to understand that there was a woman sitting in the wings, ready to add a similar story to Anita Hill's, and the Senate Judiciary Committee's chairman would not let her testify. That chairman was Joe Biden. Yeah.
Why not? Why wouldn't he let her testify?
No, because I think it has to do, because no one knows. So my question is, I don't know. No one knows. I have a hypothesis. Thomas.
He should be asked that question. The current president should be asked that question.
Thomas's biggest supporter, the only reason you've heard of Justice Clarence Thomas right now, the reason for that is because he got into Yale in affirmative action. But the reason we really have heard of Justice Thomas is because the senator from Missouri, whose name I'm not forgetting, was his huge, Danforth, I think, was huge. I forget that guy's name, was a huge supporter of Thomas. And I think maybe Biden was deferring to him because Biden did that back then. And I'm not saying that's wrong. By the way, as a general rule, I'm not even saying that's wrong. The senators have to have their relationships, but Biden should have let that woman testify.
Right.
Pete, I want to spend 5 minutes on a little bit of Justice Thomas's jurisprudence, which goes along with these ethical lapses, which are really bad.
I want to spend the next 5 minutes listening along with everybody else. Go ahead.
So here's a good one. Justice Thomas wrote a dissenting opinion saying that anyone under 18 has no free speech rights ever, anytime, anywhere, anyplace.
What? So
everything you've read about the kids in schools and armbands and the case about the cheerleader, all that stuff, Justice Thomas believes that because in 1789, kids had no rights separate from their parents, they should have no rights separate from their parents today. That's the truth. That's really true. I mean, it's unbelievable. So that's kind of, can you believe this kind of thing? In addition, Justice Thomas believes that something called the Establishment Clause does not apply to the states at all. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The legal machinery here is complicated, so it doesn't matter. But under Justice Thomas's view of those two religion clause rules, the state of Georgia tomorrow could announce itself to be a Catholic state, and it could fund priests teaching Bibles, because he does not think the Establishment Clause applies to the states. He does think the Second Amendment applies to the states. Gee, I wonder why, right? I'm sorry, he thinks the Second Amendment applies to the states, not so. So basically, Georgia can do anything it wants with regard to religion, in terms of endorsing religion, supporting religion, but buying off religion. So that's kind of bizarre, if you think about it. Justice Thomas has also, and I'm not making this up, according to the New York Times, has advocated the overturning of 250 Supreme Court cases. Pete, 200.
What do you mean by he's advocated to overturn certain cases, but he's advocated internally with the other justices?
No, in public. No, in his opinions, over 30 years, he's advocated the overturning of 250 cases.
And why is, forgive my ignorance, why is that so significant? What does an average justice advocate?
He said he doesn't, because he just said on last Friday, he doesn't believe in precedent. Precedent is a lazy man's thinking, he said. In other words,
is there any merit to that argument?
Well, only if you don't believe in the rule of law.
Well, what do you mean? Because if
similar people should be treated similarly. The whole idea of precedent, in addition to giving advice and notice to the community as to what's required and what's not, is that similarly situated people should be treated. Now, I wrote a blog post saying that Justice Thomas's account of precedent is actually accurate when it comes to the Supreme Court. Only he says the quiet part out loud, bullet for him for that, except it's one more reason why the Supreme Court's not a court, because courts do take precedent seriously, Pete. They do. They have to. It's part of their job. And they don't, and they never have. But it's the cases he would reverse that are so interesting. So Gideon versus Wainwright is one of those cases that I think almost everybody believes in. And what it says is that if you are charged with a crime above a certain amount of money and prison time, and you can't afford an attorney is appointed for you. Everybody who watches Law and Order and everything knows that case. It is a landmark Warren Court decision. If you can't afford an attorney and the government's going to put you in jail,
right.
You have a right. Now, in our country today, the attorneys you get are often overworked, public defenders who have no time, but at least you get an attorney. Justice Thomas has said that case should be reevaluated, and basically you have a right to an attorney only if you can pay for it.
Now, come on.
No, he has.
Come on.
He has.
You have a right to an attorney only if you can pay for one. In what country? What society?
He's a monster. I'm sorry. I don't want to use the word monster because delete that out. He's a terrible person.
Not deleting that out. You're going to make me go back and work monster, because you misspoke.
Monster has racial connotations that I don't mean, so that's you got to take that out.
Okay. Well, okay. Jesus Christ.
He's a terrible person. So, in addition to thinking that you only get a lawyer if you can afford one, and in addition to thinking that Georgia can basically declare itself a Christian state or a Catholic state or a Protestant state or a Jewish state or whatever Georgia wants to do, Justice Thomas has saved his worst, and you and I have discussed this before, for affirmative action. So first of all, Thomas has admitted that he was accepted at Yale Law School because of affirmative action.
Right.
If he doesn't get to Yale Law School, he's never a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
That's just true. Second, and this is the part that gets me most riled up, and we can really end on this. So you and I have talked at least a dozen times about how I think affirmative action as a policy matter. All right, there are some issues. There are. I'm in favor of it, Pete. But I don't denigrate those people who say, yeah, but then there's a lot of pushback by whites and other people. Plus, it kind of denigrates the accomplishments of people of color who were not accepted through affirmative action. And all those policy arguments I understand.
Right.
But that's not my business as a law professor. That's not as a constitutional law professor. My business is, does the Constitution prohibit affirmative action? The answer to that's clearly not. Colorblindness is not in the Constitution. This country has never been colorblind, ever, obviously. And as a matter of original meaning, there were affirmative action plans in 1868. But that's not the horrible thing. The horrible thing is this. In a case called Fisher versus Texas, Justice Thomas, and this was all gratuitous. He didn't have to say this to make his points. He said, he really did, Pete, Fisher versus Texas, So University of Texas was all white until 1957. All white by rule, by law, until 1957. By the 2010s, they were trying to greater diversify their campus. And there were many different ways they were doing it. It's a complicated case. What Justice Thomas said was the University of Texas administrators and faculty who favored, as a policy matter, their affirmative action program had exactly the same motivations as segregationists and slaveholders.
Wow, that is...
Calling me, because I'm not in University of Texas, but I am in favor of affirmative action as a policy matter. I think there are some good arguments against it, but I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
That makes me a segregationist and a slaveholder because I want more blacks at a public law school in downtown Atlanta, 3 blocks from a hotel, that in my lifetime went to the Supreme Court and said, we don't want to take blacks. We don't have to take blacks. That makes me a slaveholder and a segregationist. I mean, Pete, his meanness on that issue is just, especially since he is an affirmative action product. I mean, it's nuts. So I want to say 2 things about Justice Thomas to end this out. I do not denigrate. That's the wrong word. I accept he basically had a traumatized childhood in a lot of ways. He lived with his grandfather in the deep South, deep segregated South. Crosses were burned on his grandfather's lawn. Wow. I am sure that was very difficult, and I have no way of even coming close to understanding how tough that might have been.
Sure.
So his reaction to that, though, that we should never help black people again because they're black, is a very weird reaction, which is what his reaction is. That we shouldn't take into account the history of racism in this country is very strange. But maybe he was traumatized. So, he
was definitely,
and there's no question that in person, and not all like Scalia was not like this. In person, it's a warm smile, a big laugh, and importantly, more important than those 2 things, he treats people really well in person. Like I don't just mean law students and law professors. He treats everybody well. He loves. It's a weird thing, but he loves Nebraska. I think Ginny went there, but he loves the Nebraska football team. Talks about it all the time. My good friend at Nebraska Law School has given him tours of the stadium like 5 times. And my good friend, who's also a progressive like me and doesn't like Justice Thomas's opinions, says to me all the time, he's so nice to the staff. He's so nice to the workers. And that's a good thing.
I'm not
denigrating that. But in his official public life, he is unethical. He is inconsistent. He is a hypocrite. And above all else, he is a GOP partisan operative, just like his wife.
Well, I mean, I do appreciate, and I think it matters when we talk about a person, certainly the way that you're talking about Justice Thomas, that you humanize him, and you just did that here at the end. I think that's super important because it's so easy to demonize, and I think it's also why you choose your words wisely.
Yeah, he's not all bad, right? He's not all bad. He's friendly.
No, I mean, there's always something. There's always a conversation around the way that you treat people who can help you and the way that you treat other people that you don't know or that can't help you. And there's always a conversation about how maybe sometimes you overcompensate in your personal life, even maybe in your volunteer time or donating money, because you feel bad or guilty about your work life. You make money in an unethical way. And so you're really kind to people. Like, I don't know. I think it's important to take the measure of a person entirely as we decide what kind of person they are. And that's what you allowed us to do with Clarence Thomas. So I don't think that's original. I think that's.
And I just want to say also that the reason I'm not ranting about Alito or somebody else, I want people to remember he is our most senior. I mean, the chief is the Chief Justice, but Thomas is our most senior justice. He is the oldest, longest serving Supreme Court justice, and numerous conservatives, including Randy Barnett at Georgetown and many others, say he has been the most influential, and he has over 100 law clerks out there doing important. Many of his law clerks become judges, including the clerk who wrote that horrible Florida opinion, striking down the CDC's, COVID stuff. He is wildly influential, Pete, in conservative circles, wildly, as is his wife. And I think we should all ask, should a Supreme Court justice be that partisan? Because he's taken partisanship to a new level. And that's what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. And you've certainly, not held back. You have a long record on Scalia and everybody else. So I think your integrity is in fine shape.
And can I add one more thing to that before we finish? One last sentence. So I have said publicly many times that Justice Ginsburg, for example, before she became a justice, was an American hero. Equal rights for women today, although they're being taken away, but she was one of the most important, if not the most important litigator on behalf of gender equality in our country's history. A true American hero. At the Supreme Court, she voted progressive 99.9% of the time, and I've called that out. I said, how can it be the Constitution means what the Democratic Party thinks it means? Which is what I say about Thomas. How can it be the Constitution always means what the Republican Party thinks it means? The difference is, although Ginsburg made some mistakes when she got late in life and she got older, is Thomas's partisan work while a justice is different than a Sotomayor or a Ginsburg, who always, or even a Gorsuch, who it's a question of degree, and Thomas's partisan work while a justice is different than everybody else's. And that's what America needs to know.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all of that. Tell me one great thing in your life, and then we'll end on that.
I'm tonight at 7:00. I go see both of my kids, Sarah and Kai. Sarah's 14, Kai 13, in the show Shrek Jr., where they both will be singing, and somehow both of them have really good voices, even though both Lynn and I are completely tone deaf in every way.
That's great. And a great note to end that. Also, I want to make a somewhat private text public. You did your 63rd podcast last week. You sent me a nice text about it. You wrote, I've gotten so much feedback. You said, I've had almost all the con law superstar academics and major court journalists on. I've gotten so much positive feedback from the guests who say they forget it's a podcast and we're just having a discussion. And then you thanked me. And that's, I only want to bring up your podcast.
Read it the way I wrote it to you if you have it.
You wrote, that, my friend, is because of what you taught me.
And that's true.
Well, I don't.
100%.
Okay. So that's awesome. And it made me feel obviously amazing. But I just wanted to say congratulations on the podcast and just, again, tell people to listen to Supreme Myths wherever you get your podcast.
When it comes out is a real doozy.
Oh, yeah. What do you got?
Well, there's a guy named Brian Leiter at the University of Chicago who might be top 5 legal philosophers in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what he says about this Supreme Court, I'm just going to leave it there.
Oh, is there an argument ensue or?
No.
Oh,
he's on my side, but he's.
Oh, can't wait. When does it drop?
We talk about religion and the court.
Does it drop at the same time when you?
No, because I can't.
Whenever you can, you drop. Okay.
It'll drop Wednesday or Thursday.
Awesome. Can't wait. Thank you so much, and congratulations on becoming a major TikToker at your age.
Thanks.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird, isn't it?
I love it. All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, there he goes, Eric Segall at Eastman Segall on Twitter, on TikTok. Listen to his podcast, Supreme Myths. Get his books, follow him, and support him, and let him know that you heard him here. And thanks again to Sarah Kendzior, to John Carroll as well. We'll get Pete Coe working back in the flow here very soon. Thanks again to everybody who hung out with me last night, cheered me up. Hopefully the hangout cheered you up a little bit, given the horrific massacre, and it's just too hard to understand here. For me on Tuesday night. I'll be headed into the woods with Dr. Zatz on Wednesday morning. That's for sure. I've got a great conversation coming up with historian Kenneth C. Davis this week. Looking forward to that, sharing that with you. And Memorial Day weekend, of course, coming up. That's what we're talking about. And that's it, folks. I will just mention, in case you're still listening, I should have mentioned this earlier, both those interviews took place before the massacre in Texas at the elementary school there, and so obviously, otherwise I would have talked about that with both of those guests, but that those interviews took place first. All right, that's it. I will talk to you tomorrow. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye. John Carroll, take us out.
You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand